Thank you. I now request Architect Vijay Kumar, Chairman Arts Trust, to formally welcome the gathering. Good morning, everyone. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all on this Sunday morning to the event hosted by Arts Trust. And this particular day actually is one of the new beginnings for Arts Trust as well. We've looked at this event as a starting point for one of the reasons why Arts Trust was started. It is to give back to the city and to work with the organization, the corporation, and the city administration towards creating a better city and a better public place. So Trichy as such, I think it's one of the most gifted cities in terms of its infrastructure, in terms of the water resource what we have, in terms of the size of the city and the population as well. I think it is a very it's a city, the size of the city gives immense scope for all that in the administration as well as the citizens to interact and to own public places. So I think that's one of the reasons, and then we conducted this competition. So I would like to welcome you all. I think the commissioner would be joining us a little late, and this organization, actually people from the other support organizations, I think they'll be joining. So I would like to welcome them all, the Seed Foundation, the Trichy Tourism Federation, Trichy City Corporation, the Indian Institute of Architects, and the School of Architecture. So I think these are the organizations which supported Arts Trust in conducting this competition, and I would like to welcome them all. And apart from them, I would like to welcome and introduce our jurors, Professor P.V.K. Rameshwar from Ahmedabad, Architect Mohan Rao, Shamitra Ghosh, and Anup Nayak from Bangalore, Architect Rohan Shokma from Mumbai, and Sailesh from Chennai. And apart from this, Architect P.G. Shivkumar from Trichy, he was one of the jurors, and I welcome you all. So I would like to welcome the press and the citizens of Trichy as well. I think we'd like to have more of participants. I think probably they have assured that they would join. But what we thought from Arts Trust is that after this discussion, we would like to approach all the organizations. We will try to present to the organizations. And this exhibition, apart from the 3 entries which has been shortlisted here, we have about 8 which were shortlisted from the 31 which we received. So the 31 which we received, so we thought that we could have public exhibitions of these drawings, because I think a competition like this doesn't stop here, because I think the bigger work is from now on. How do we get all the stakeholders into this? I think that's one of the most important things which we'll have to do, and we as architects or designers, we cannot keep ourselves away from them, because I think each and every stakeholder matters, and I think it is our job to reach out to them because probably not in places like this, but we would take this exhibition to the public places. We will put this exhibition in places where people come and they incidentally or accidentally have a look at this and engage in some sort of conversation about the city. So I think that is one of the areas where we should work towards that as well. And in this whole initiative, I would like to thank architect Vidya Mohan Ram, who has been the person who guided the entire event, and along with her, it was architect Kapilan and architect Muthuraman. They had actually done the entire job, and I think in the presentation later, we would also like to inform what are the steps that were taken prior to this particular day, where we have this award ceremony. So I welcome you all and thank you. Thank you, sir. I now invite architect Kapilan to give an overview of the competition from the beginning to today. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. So I will give you a brief overview on all the steps we do, how the initiative came about, and the timeline that will happen. So Teppakkulam was actually the heart of Trichy, both metaphorically but also literally. So that is also, we can say, the birthplace of Trichy. And Trichy, as you know, is a city in the center of Tamil Nadu, with equally connected to all the other urban centers. And Teppakkulam is one very, very center. So, people who participated in the competition and voting for us would know the extent, at least, this is a precinct from where it radiates, the core city radiates. And these are some of the, so from historic monuments, which is the Rockford, the rock itself, that's more than 3.8 billion years old. Then you have the Lady of St. Luke's Church, St. Joseph's College, the Valaja Mosque. It's actually a slice of South Indian history within the precinct. So right from the 6th, 7th century AD till as late as the colonial period and continuing now, the precinct has a slice of all of Tamil Nadu and Trichy's history within this 500-meter radius. So this, how it also started was in November and December, the corporation, along with the town vending committee, there was a high court order where the encroachments, the shops along the NSB road, around Teppakulam, and outside the Rockford, the main gate area, which is a ASI protected monument, where deemed it happened of the corporation's success was finding alternate places for them within 100 and 150 meters of from where what else. So actually the large chance for them to start resetting that also took after 30 years. So this precinct is in a churn and has what happens after that. And once the vending was cleared, a region in state of flux. So we needed something out of it. And that's also one of time they approach art, such importance and such magnitude that for the future, not just for now. And we should have a long-term plan. So this is just a screen graph from the phases of eviction. So what I think until November, you would never see Teppakulam straight from the street. To regions we presented with the commissioner then was, can we use this as an opportunity to rightfully restore Teppakulam as a cultural symbol in Trichy? And Teppakulam, and like architect Vijay Kumar said, Trichy has a very interesting hydrology, not just its tanks, but its canal irrigation systems and the river. And Teppakulam was part of a connected system which has been lost over the years. Can we revive this system? Can we reclaim this, being it's the densest area and it's a place where people from 30 to 50 kilometer, even 60 kilometer radius come to Trichy
It's can we reclaim this as a public space, as a lung space in the city? And can be reintegrated in the imagination of people? Because until recently, Teppakulam, for even people from Trichy, was seen as a place of congestion, crowd, and that is something we also got during the visioning exercises with the stakeholders, their perception of Teppakulam area. So that was the initiation for this. So in February, we met the then commissioner and we said we would conduct a competition. We laid a roadmap for him, for the corporation as well. And we started the work for the competition started, but it is still 2 months of work before we could declare the brief. One of the objectives of competition, like what happens also in tier 2 cities that doesn't have an experience of long-term planning in public space design, is can we actually use this as an opportunity to create an articulated vision statement that can be accessed with all departments. So there is something strong that you can work towards it. Can you nurture public awareness among people? So it's not just projects that happen, but can we involve people in it? And can it also be a document that would lay out future trajectories for such projects, but also for the precinct? So these were the competition objectives that we started with. And that's also what we presented to the corporation. So we had a roadmap. So we presented a roadmap. And the corporation has been very patient to trust us with this process. So we started data collection work. In the meanwhile, we had heritage walk with the public to emphasize on the nature of the precinct. Then we had an urban mapping workshop with students from 5 architecture colleges, where we had temporal time-based studies on the city. Then we had a visioning workshop with stakeholders, including people from corporation, ASI, and other civic organizations, which informed the competition brief, that set out the competition brief. So we had the competition brief. We had about 2 weeks for registration time. And then in the meantime, we prepared a design kit that was shared with the participants. We had 1 month of time for the submission, and within 14 days, which is today, we have the award announcement of the winning entries. And the next process is that the winning entry we would source a rough cost estimate, and then we would work with the corporation to make it a reality. So just I'll go through some of the preparatory works that we undertook in preparing the brief for the design kit. So the first thing, we did have a website, that was one of the first things, and a social media platform that was more communication platform. This was the heritage map. So it served 2 purposes. One, this was conducted by architect Gayatri from CARE School of Architecture. We had architect Mani Arasan from CARE to do a photogrammetry of the entire precinct. So now we also have a documentation of the precinct with high resolution drone photographs, but also a 3D cloud model, which became the basis for the documentation later on. We did we assimilated a lot of studies, morphological studies, including documenting all the heritage maps, the hydrological network as it exists now, the mobility mapping that exists, the possibility, the open spaces that are available, and enclaves or own institutions that have a stake in the city, and also view cones. I think some of them over a period of development, especially in historic course, we tend to forget the heritage axes and view cones. So we documented all these. So this was part of the studies, morphological studies that were done of the precinct. We had an urban mapping workshop facilitated by architect Vidya Mohan Kumar on April 3, 4, and 5, where we had 18 students from 5 colleges and 4 coordinators participate, where from the morning till evening, we had time-based studies. Time-based studies of pedestrian volume count, traffic volume count, age and gender studies, age and gender count, park on-street parking quantities, and activity mapping along with vendor mapping. So this was done across 2 days, one a weekday and the next is a weekend, to get a sample. And it was done across the morning and evening peak hours and an off-peak hour. So this also gave the basis of the quantum of movement or people that access this place. As part of the urban mapping workshop, we tried to get interviews from various people, so vendors that are there, visitors and residents, which we tried to get a sample of the interviews, and we also had it for the visioning workshop to get the pulse of what people think. Well, Commissioner Mr. Madhubalan IAS, the Executive Engineer of Planning, Mr. Sivapadam, Assistant Executive Engineer, Mr. Tamil Selvan, the Ward JE, Mr. Ramesh, and AWE Engineering, Mr. Krishnamurthy, were from the corporation team. We also had people, including the Assistant Director from the Archaeological Survey of India, Trichy Circle. On the civic organizations, we had Trichy Tourism Federation, SEED, Confederate of CII, CREDI, Indian Institute of Architects, Trichy Center, and as stakeholders and some of the large land parcel owners in the area, we had St. Joseph's College, Trichy. To be done and laid out the strategies or the themes that would have during the event. So it was a very interactive event across the better part of the day. And these were some of the themes that we came across, and I think these were the 9 themes that were also put across in the brief. So ecology and water systems, movement and air quality, heat and comfort, edges and thresholds, everyday life and ritual, because Teppakulam is also, there are some 6 temple chariot festivals that happens across the year along with other festivals. Heritage is a very important part, and as we discovered, it's one of, like, how do you make it accessible to all? And one thing that was very important for the corporation is also, how do we face it? Like, what would be the quick wins and what can be taken up later? Which came into these 9 design provocations that is the core content of the brief. So then on 15th, we opened the registrations and the brief was released with the last date for queries 1 week from that, and the registration 2 weeks from the release of the brief, last date for registration. Submission deadline was on 31st of May, so they had, the competing participants had exactly a month for their design, and within 2 weeks we had the jury for the 2 weeks that we have proceeding to. So the competition brief with recognition and prizes. So we had 40 registrants in the professional category and 31 qualified for the jury in the final. And in the student category, we had 31 registrations with 10 qualified submissions. And they were given a detailed CAD drawing with a 3D based model in SketchUp and aerial photographs and ortho drone maps. So these were part of the design kit. So we invited very eminent jurors, given the weight of the competition, which over yesterday's jury discussion and today have added great immense value in filtering and also giving a strategy for us to take forward. So these are the professional category jurors. We have 5 of them, and student category jurors, eminent practitioners and academicians who have worked in different scales across various parts of India. So these are some snapshots from the jury deliberation yesterday, which comes us to today, where we would have a jury discussion and the announcement of winners. The top 3 entries in the professional category are pinned, and then some of these studies are also pinned here. And the jury would announce the winning order. So this is the core team, support team that have been with us throughout the competition or the organization of the competition. Just thank you.
Thank you, Kapil, for the overview. We'll now move on to the panel discussion, which will be moderated by Architect Udaya Mohan Kumar, and the jurors will be participating in that. Please give us 2 minutes for the arrangement. To take the chairs for the panel discussion.
Okay, so good morning to all of you. I think it's a very heartwarming moment to be here today after this 4-month journey, and I didn't realize it's been 4 months until I saw Kapilan's presentation, and then very nice to sort of have that recap of what happened. I think I feel like it just went by so fast. Of course, we met here last in this very same room in April, and and then I think from that point to where we are today, sitting amongst shortlisted entries, and to have a room full of people here in great anticipation for the results, I think it's a really very gratifying journey to see what Teppakulam can become from now on. So as a sort of closing segment, we have this wonderful panel discussion with our wonderful panelists. I'd like to first thank all of you for making the time to come here from so many different cities from across the country and to have given your time over the last 2 weeks. It was a very tight timeline. We were constantly being nudged by Trichy Corporation to, finish up this and give them something that they can go and implement at Teppakulam. And your cooperation was obviously, an immensely important role in selecting the entries that would see the light of day. So yes, a big thank you to all of you for, riding along with us, participating in this, evaluation process over the last week, and then also coming here for some very, very interesting deliberations that we had in the room yesterday, both in the professional category as well as the student category. We also had, I'm not sure how many people joined us, but we also did have a session with the student category jurors yesterday, a small panel discussion where we discussed AI in architectural education. Again, a very, very enthralling discussion that ensued yesterday, very pertinent to the times that we live in, and the backdrop, of course, was the competition and the various entries that came in for that. But let's, we'd like to hear some thoughts from the jurors. Just a first impression of your, you were of course privy to the jury process, but I think Kapilan's presentation has given you an overview of what happened before you all came into the picture as well. Like, can we just have a quick round of thoughts from anyone? Like, anybody would like to respond as to this whole experience of this competition and your impressions of it so far from what you have seen?
Good morning. So I just browsed through I was a part of the jury of the student entries, browsed through the professional entries, and I can see the richness of the depth that they are able to articulate. I was wondering how it came through after I saw Kapilan's presentation. It's clear that you have given so much amount of input and such amount of groundwork has been done in framing this. And that directly translated as the ability for them to grow on top of it. So I think great amount of work for you guys to put a package and then put all these content inside so that it could be cohesively understood, because the level mapping, the hydrology mapping and the drone images brought a great clarity on what the exact nature of the topography is, and the photographs for them to do montage. So a really good amount of work and great platform that you guys created, on top of which the competition has also become phenomenally interesting as entries. And hats off to you guys for that. And yeah, that's something that I wanted to say.
Thank you for this, because sometimes when you sit outside and on the periphery, you rarely realize the intensity at which these projects need to be done. I think that was what was quite interesting, and hats off to the entire team for piecing this together. For me, it left probably two pertinent questions as I navigated this. One was, is the Teppakulam a place, a system, or a relationship? So that was quite intriguing in the sense of what, and probably I looked at it from that lens. Then the second big question was, can heritage become a driver of the future rather than the reminder of the past? So for me, it was like a couple of thresholds of shift and big decisions the city has taken. I think commendable for the city to do this clearing up and getting the Teppakulam back to being visible as a city system. So since you've taken this step, I think the onus, or like what you said, the hard work begins now. I think we will be done and dusted and gone, but I'm saying the entries which have won, and you as a collective has a lot more responsibility on your shoulders to see that it matures into something real. Yeah, and I think this is a tougher journey.
Yeah, and thanks, Kapilan, for actually laying out all the hard work, because even though we have been reading the design brief and things, sometimes you take these things for granted, not realizing that not just 5 colleges, the innumerable number of stakeholders that were brought together, not just for the documentation, but I think the key differentiator in this process was the visioning process that you undertook, which actually helped lay out the many very important provocations. So it is not just a design brief, I would think of it as a set of provocations, which from the number of entries that we saw, there were such varied responses to these provocations in very wonderful ways, because it also has to do with the lens that one uses to enter these questions. So it's not merely a design resolution or a problem solving exercise, but the ability to be able to look beyond one's core engagement, which in this case I would imagine it to be only design, but there were much deeper engagements either in the social processes, in the spiritual background, in hydrology, and that was really heartening when we were looking at across the entries. Like in every competition, of course, the jury always uses this, and we think it's a cliche that, oh, they were all equally good and we had a hard time, judging. But really, it's not a cliche. We spent, I think each of us had come with our list of 3 favorites, obviously, or 5 favorites. But then you actually go through each entry again with the others, and then you start seeing why there is values that you had probably not seen earlier through the conversations you have with the jury, and that was equally enriching, and I hope we have done justice to all the entries.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure being here and just watching this collective that has decided to take a Sunday morning and kind of come here, it just shows the sort of energy and interest that there can be in a process like this. And that is really heartening. I feel like today, the way that the nation is transforming, these kinds of initiatives that you guys have undertaken to really take ownership of our cities, cities like Trichy, cities like Allahabad, cities that have had rich histories, but have never really been kind of seen, and those histories themselves are some things that we are not necessarily respecting, unfortunately, in the way that we are thinking about the future of our country. And I think the attentiveness that this project brings to neighborhoods, localities, local histories, local stakeholders, and somehow the ability to create an excitement around the rejuvenation of an important historical center is very, very heartening. I feel that this represents not only something that is great for Trichy, but also as a model, as something that we really can think of in the ways that so many of our smaller towns and cities around the country seem to be changing. They're transforming so rapidly. And unfortunately, we do not have an imagination for the nature of those transformations. Usually these transformations are modeled on, the big city models, who in turn are modeled on other city models. So there doesn't seem to be an imagination of who we can become from the ground up. I feel like this attentiveness to a particular location, a particular ecological history, and an attempt to begin to address those specifics is a really important step that I think you've undertaken, and doing it with stakeholders who are actively engaged with such a system is an extremely important sort of move, I feel, within kind of thinking about our cities today. Yeah? So thank you so much for that. At the entries, I mean, we were part of the student committee, and I don't know what the other 2 jurors felt, but I felt like although the information and the dossier that you did provide them was so incredibly intense, I did feel like the students could have taken more risks, could have played more. They did not have the burden of making it realistic. I felt that there was the projects could have been more provocative in terms of what the future could look like. And I think that they stepped back from that opportunity. So I would say that would be something that I would encourage students to be a little bit more free, a little bit more playful, and a little bit more adventurous. And maybe we'll have more fun later on. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here and it's wonderful to see that Trichy has done this. Possibly, I think it sets a kind of an example for. It's tougher in bigger cities, I presume. I think when we look at this kind of exercise, I think it's complex because it's about what we mean by time, what we mean by history, what is symbolic, what is celebration, and what is daily life in such a space. So it makes it fairly complex. And what defines all those layers, which means who is us? Us is not me, but I think us is many people, multiple layers, and I think that understanding is something which is fairly complex, and especially where you have so many layers of time in this. So there is a pragmatic side to it, which is the planning side of it. There is the whether it's a temple or there's a tank. It's there are certain associations and memories. So to recreate that is something which to bring back life, and I think while we were judging the student entries, and I think the later discussion that I think the biggest takeaway when we were talking about not only competitions but also institutions is the idea of hope. That can it create the idea of hope that there is a future which is inclusive of the past, it's inclusive of the people.
I'm very happy to be here and at the same time very honored to be part of this. I see it knowing the city a little more because of my earlier visits. I think it's a fantastic move, and I see it as a crystallization of a lot of efforts from Professor Ramlingam, Professor Vijay Kumar, local IAA, and many others. This has been brewing since a long time, and this restlessness and impatience has, I think, taken now the first tangible or some kind of a crystallization of an effort, which is a fantastic beginning. And I think great cities are made with the initiatives of leading institutions and citizens and organizations. And you cannot always hope that the government to take always the initiative. They can only facilitate. But I think the major initiatives, even in Ahmedabad, I think historically is because of the citizens, a lot of good things have happened. And I see this happening here, which I think I'm personally very, very happy. And I think I really commend the effort for that. The formation or the detailing of the competition, I think is a little later move. But I think the earlier one, which I think needs recognition of that kind of an effort. And I believe that public projects are not an individual architect or a firm's domain, but is a very participatory to get best of the ideas from all across and to see that the city really moves ahead and benefits from that kind of an initiative. And so I think as against many other cities where we always see where projects are cornered by very select few, to open it up for ideas to many more, I think is again a great move to have taken place with almost no pre-qualifying criterias. It really gives a chance of a total fresh architect to a very well seasoned architect. I think again a very, very positive move. And the process to take up a very challenging kind of a site, of course, is also the most urgently demanding kind of a site. Is also one of the most complex sites in the city. To taken it up to be able to prove to each one of the citizens that something can be done, and we can, if we take the initiative. And the tier 2 and the tier 3 cities, there's still scope for things to be retrieved and hopefully be brought back to many of the good things. And so in that process, this layered kind of thing, because I think it is layer over layer over layer, the history and the changing meaning of everything, which I think has been very well captured, put forth as questions. And I think very well rounded of seeing all dimensions, involving stakeholders to even evolve the kind of a brief and the challenge, I think is something, an effort which needs to be really commendable. And I would both thank and congratulate the team to really set this process on. And I hope it takes off that this is just the beginning and an opportunity to prove that something can be done in the city by the people. Thank you.
Hello. I was part of the jury member just because I am from Trichy. My valuation was more on basic problem what we face now. First of all, for all Trichy members, Teppakulam is just a name. We haven't seen it or we haven't felt it or no way it is being used by us. So what best it can be brought into the fabric, the busy fabric. That was my intention and my evaluation was more on that. Whereas other jury members were very meticulous in every item and their thinking was more macro level, whereas I was totally lost with them and I was out of place. I used to say, anyway, it went on very well. Thanks, Kabilan. Thanks, Vijay Kumar.
First of all, big congratulations to all the participants. This has been a very fantastic exercise, and a lot of things that we value through our education and through professional practice and otherwise in the society and for the environment has actually come through this very clearly. In many entries, we could see a deep commitment to understanding the ecological layers and the systems and processes of environment and nature. Some of them looked at the community structure and also realities on the ground has been recorded and used strongly in design moves. Similarly, heritage was also given a lot of value. So one could see that all these values that we talk about has actually come through in different ways, in different entries, and I think all the entries had. We should congratulate people for putting their brains together. Although our job was to, of course, look at them and put marks and evaluate and all that, but we appreciate almost all of them had great thinking behind what you have done, and so congratulations to all the participants. And the other thing, what I felt about the process, which I must congratulate the organizers and the people behind it, is that the government, institution, and industry partnership, this is the future for India. India is a very complex place. We know that how difficult it is to get things done in a government kind of setup in the environment where there are a lot of issues. I'm not pointing any particular issue. So here is a model that has been created or invented where the institution plays a role in formulating and putting things together. The industry comes forward and participates in really bringing out the ideas, and the government becomes the provider and also the executor of that. So I think this is a very replicable model, and if this becomes successful, this will become like a benchmark for many projects, I feel. I'm not at all looking at just the 2-tier cities or anything like that. I think even there are many places even in Chennai or some of the not so urban areas also can look at this as a model, and it is. I must congratulate Vijay and Kapalan and the team of KR Institution who have done a lot of background work. I think it is really, really appreciated at this moment. Great appreciations to Vidya, who has been coordinating this entire thing, and I must apologize because I got onto her nerves a little bit because I was going through a little difficult period and she was following up. It was all done in a very meticulous manner, very professionally. Everyone was, shared things in a proper way. The evaluation, she made sure that everyone gets things on time and evaluates on time. And also, yesterday I must also,
realized that, the amount of seriousness that was applied in looking at each of the entry, looking at each of the ideas, even deliberating on that playfully and seriously, all the jury members have applied a lot of time and mind into this, which is really, really, especially, there are very senior people who have a lot of tons of experience in evaluating things and also in doing projects. So this is all in all, it is a really, really a wonderful exercise. Congratulations to Vidya and Vijay, Kapilan and the entire team who have put this together. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for very generous compliments and encouragement to carry an effort like this through. Yeah, I mean, I think even for me, I see it as a very replicable, and I know a lot of you resonated with that as well. It's a very replicable format, and I'm also for me as well. I said it was heartwarming to be here right at the beginning, and it's also because of how everyone came together, and and I've always believed that the energy in a tier 2, tier 3 city is way more different than what it is in a metro city. I think there's a lot more cynicism in a metro city, a bigger city, as opposed to smaller ones, where if I were to steal Rohan's phrase from yesterday, the horizon of hope is still very much visible here. So I just want to a lot of you also pointed to your you were referring to some of the entries and your response to what you saw on the panels. My next question to you is about your impressions of the entries itself. Specifically, I'd like anyone can take this. Is so we had 9 design provocations as was put out. Which of the 9 provocations did you feel was most successfully addressed? Right, that was one. And then just as a second part to the question is, which ones do you think the participants struggled with most? And why do you think that may have been the case? So just if you could recall from yesterday's session of looking at the entries, which ones were successfully addressed or mostly addressed by the participants, and which ones did they seem to struggle with, and why? The design provocations. Where's the laptop? No, we put it up. It's there. Yeah, so these were the 9 design provocations. Would you like me to read it out, or you can see it? Yeah. Okay. Yes, please. Yes.
I might be a little odd guy out here for this simple reason. I had a tough time accepting that you have to evaluate based on 9 provocations, and to look at them in a segregated manner was something which I'm still not able to gulp that idea. And for me, I didn't know where to segregate what makes sense as a ritual, overlaid with my daily life, overlaid with a commercial need, overlaid with heritage, overlaid with ecological concerns. There's no way I could segregate. And if I have to admit now, I worked the reverse way. I started seeing how overall, what is the strength of an idea? And you don't know whether 5% was heritage or 10% was heritage and 5% was traffic. I think my mind doesn't work like that. And for me, I think I value the quality of simultaneity in the Indian spaces. And this is one perfect example where you cannot segregate or put in slots or under heads I see everything too intertwined, too interdependent, and therefore, so if you ask me that weightage of this is 5%, this is 25, I find it extremely difficult. So therefore, my answer would not be which is the one they attempted where they had a problem or something. So it was how they could address everything simultaneously, and therefore I cannot point out to one saying addressed or not, but overall, I think it all depended on the kind of an approach. Some people who had the maturity to look into laying the ground first, for example, which would mean that can I lay down my ground rules of the traffic plan, my parking, my circulation and movement patterns, and above which then I do vis-a-vis someone else who get caught up with visual imagery and start up with a very quick, almost solution based on a reconnaissance survey and come up with do this, don't do this, and just do a very impressionist kind of a thing, or get even further carried away to a very renaissance idea of coherence. And I think all that was based on their approaches. So I would still value looking at all, and I think you addressed, or rather you identified all the provocations, which was, I think I could not think of anything which was missing. So I think if one took all of that into consideration in one breath, is where one would hit it right.
Other than the difficulty in actually assigning them values as jurors, if we leave that apart, but I personally thought the process in which you laid out the provocations were like constant nagging reminders to each participant. So you may have this grand idea. Many of us will work from a more holistic approach, could be a more nuanced, could be more sensitive. Somebody could be coming from a grand vision. There could be many of them. But I think these were literally like the horrid school teacher we all hated, who would constantly nag you to do the small things and not forget that. But I think that was really useful because you could see many of these expressions. You know, it could be the idea of the small moves. It could be the one of the ecology. They were not tropes. They were not simply hashtags that the participant, kept it there. And it was a lot of positive engagement and with varied degrees, one can imagine, and rightfully so. Not everyone takes each provocation equally. But I think it was...
They weren't expected to.
Exactly. Yeah. But rather than give a set of must-haves and must-dos, I think these provocations that way actually helped or egged every one of them towards a more holistic solution.
For me, it was a struggle, honestly, and I did speak to you about it, that sometimes these provocations are good as a starting framework, but I think the value which it builds when it gets interconnected. So for me, they were not like silos sitting and to be wanting to be measured. I was always looking at how they would interconnect. Sometimes they could pair, sometimes they could triple, sometimes it could be a collective whole. And you'll notice
I think the innovation comes from that.
That's right.
How
so,
they put it together.
So I think if you look at the winning entries today, I think most of them have gone beyond the provocation. I think they've had the ability to look at it from the system side, connect everything together. And I'm sure your reason for measurement was important. But I feel that a lot of this, at least the top 5 of them, of course, we're talking only top 3, but the top 5 of them had great clarity in which they kind of intertwined one with the other without actually getting biased towards the weightages which were there. For me, that was intriguing and fundamental questions raised. In fact, through the narratives of whether it's an ecological system or is it or a place or is it intertwined with community. I think these were interesting propositions which came about. So I would look at it from that bias rather than the provocation bias. So as a juror, I took that route from just veering away from the provocation, but rather than looking at the clear-cut intent. And in some, it was also this art of building a very powerful narrative. And it was not necessary to follow this. I think so some of thought processes was on clear-cut narrative. And building their own weightages, I feel that that was also quite interesting. So for me, this was just a base framework. And going forward, I think this continues to be the framework, and you might have multiple other operational models which will come and intertwine to it. What was not addressed, because that was also part of, and sometimes as creative people, we don't address operational sides. It unfortunately also becomes our limitation in many ways. It would have been nice to see more operational, because the city wants that, right? Today you're already in a pressure cooker situation. Things are done. Tomorrow morning you have to get this project up and about running. What does it mean for the city corporation to take the next project forward? And I feel that sometimes in scales like this, we should look at the idea of what is the main principal idea and then break it down into sub-projects and see what these sub-projects become actionable. I know it's not the traditional design way of looking at it, but sometimes when you place yourself in the city administration shoes, we're always looking at these sub-projects easily actionable because they're accountable to people. So I feel that what could have been given more weightage was to look at some great actionable keys to it. So that's the little gap which I see. I'm sure that you guys will mentor them to drive this to conclusion.
Yeah, I think giving a set of provocations was good for initiating the thinking process. So that way, I think it was very good. I felt each of these questions sort of would have actually kind of forced people to think of almost all the concerns that was already there. But the other part of the question where what is not probably where people have not reached or not realized. I felt, it's not easy. It doesn't come even with some of the masters. But, what is the identity of Trichy? And what are the things that constitute the image of Teppakulam precinct? Historically, aesthetically, experientially, what is that image and how are we addressing that? How are we enhancing that? So that kind of a standpoint, that kind of clarity probably will come, I'm sure, when we move forward, because that is very important. A lot of design that has been imposed in Indian landscapes have a very Western kind of template that is behind it, and that has not worked well in many places with respect to integrating with the local people, the local culture, the community, the kind of cross-section that we have in terms of, the demographic and the social structures and all that, women working on ground, so many things which probably has a disconnect with some of those templates. So that is where it is very important to understand what is the place and what is its identity and how that can be enhanced or how that can become the starting point for such an exercise. So I think that we didn't see that as a thing, but I think it will come through in the process.
The student category, I think you had a different. I mean, there was no pressure for implementation. But also that they worked with the same set of design provocations as the professional category. So what did you feel was not addressed more so?
Well, I felt like the student category could feel freer. Yeah. But I felt maybe this is the problem of giving people too good a brief. is they felt weighed down by the seriousness of what they were supposed to be doing. So I felt maybe the student brief could have been tweaked a little bit more to allow them more of a play. Because as students, I think we were talking about this yesterday as well. The students have to also feel enabled to challenge things. Yeah? Because that's really what students should be doing. They should be saying that everything that has happened until now is something that we need to rethink, because that's the power of the youth. But I felt that they were really kind of weighed down by the seriousness of the brief. So they ended up becoming very timid and doing projects that were quite slight. The weight of the possible seemed to kind of weigh down on them. Which was, I mean, I understood that. I mean, because we are living in times when when if somebody is going to stand out, we try and kind of put them all into the same bracket. I mean, you should not stand out, be the same. So I felt like that was one of the things that I was not worried about, but I understood where that came from. I felt like they could have taken one of those narratives and said, okay, let's just think about children and let's see what happens if we just work with children and look at what does the city become if it's really only for the children. And that could have been playful, fun, wild, amusement park like maybe, I don't know, something that would have provoked us to rethink what cities are meant to be and who they are for. So I was like, hoping that next time they'll be able to kind of feel a little more freer. But this is just another question about like the composition of us. I was actually wondering whether, I know that in the process itself, there were stakeholders from the community that were there. There were stakeholders from different parts of the city that were there. I was actually wondering whether you considered a jury that was composed of not only experts, but also stakeholders, whether that could have been also something. So then the conversations would have perhaps been of a different tonality. Thanks.
No, I think it's an important point you're raising, Rohan, but we do have plans to have a public exhibition of this, and we would, a People's Choice entry is something that we will definitely consider in a forum like that. And I mean, that would require a little bit of work as well. We're thinking of, bilingual interpretations of the entries. Of course, they're all primarily in English. We need to be more reachable to do something like that. But yes, there's it doesn't end today, but your point is very well taken, and it must reach the people. We do want to, put it out at the Teppakulam itself, in fact, as an open exhibition, and then have it move to different parts of the city so that they see that such an initiative has happened in the city as well, and that it could happen in your neighborhood next year, for another public space over there. So I think it's about getting that word out. But yes, I think I very much do like the idea that they need to have a say in the entries and evaluating them in some sense in their own way, like People's Choice Award is something that we should definitely consider at that point.
Yeah, I think in the students category, it did feel like almost, I think Rohan already spoke about it, almost it looked like a professional category, which is feeling the weight of, it's almost like as if it has to have good manners. So the good manners is safe, and there is perhaps at that stage, I think it could have been more experimental in testing certain ideas, which, if they can be deployed, can lead to certain conversations. So I think these are opportunities of putting out there certain concepts or ideas which whether they are very different, can lead to at least a rethink of things. So the divergence was very limited, almost very limited and fairly safe. So maybe it's also a reflection of, I mean, it seemed like it's very practical, it is doable, it is achievable, it is sensitive on one ground. So I think maybe it's a reflection of how we learn from what we learn at our institutions, where greater emphasis is that it's an architecture of a community. So that's why it plays that role of gradual evolution. And I think that's something which one could think that there is perhaps a space or a missed opportunity in a student competition, that it can actually bend uh, the rules to look at that.
I don't have anything to say to this. I coincide with what they have said. It's the same. They have tried to come to terms with the 9 provocations, which at a student level is too difficult to comprehend. They are at various layers, various complexities, and various parameters which have to tie together to make a sensible, intervention, which has weighed down on the ability to think beyond what could have been done. So everybody kind of came to the norms of doing what is feasible, possible, which doesn't put a foot out of the line, rather than thinking of something, maybe 1 or 2 provocations being thought about as a theme that they could have come out with, as Architect Rohan had said. So that heaviness has reflected in the student category, yes.
All right, so we'll lesson learned. Don't give them the same set of provocations, I guess, and maybe reframe a light version of it for the students. Yeah. But thank you for the feedback. I think it's very yes.
I thought this is important to mention. This kind of an initiative, it is not just mere provocation, the whole initiative also makes a point that, typically architecture is always discussed in the newspaper columns of gourmet cooking or something like that. It is never taken something that it primarily touches people's lives. It seems that you can always avoid it. So it is not fashion, not superfluous, and it's something much more serious and fundamental to changing people's life and effects. And I think this kind of initiative is very good for the profession to say that architecture can make a difference to the city and the life, and it is just not something that you can wish away. So again, to congratulate and commend the efforts for this entire.
Thank you again. My next question to all of you is that, across the 2 categories, we saw several entries that had physical interventions, of course, the very sort of tangible physical interventions. This is sort of a think piece kind of a question, is, in your view, what do you think separates a well-designed place from a truly successful public space? And I'd like to think that they're both not the same, and even in the deliberations, I recall some of the comments where, I said it looked too orderly, and, but I'm not sure that this would work, or, the sort of the level of clutter. And I think the very interesting discussions that came out, the phrases that were used during the deliberation. So it's really a distinction between, a well-designed place and a truly successful urban place. Free to respond, any of you. A well-designed place from a truly successful public place. It's a trick question. Do you think they're the same or not?
They don't. It's magic. I'm thinking about actually some of the most prominent urban design projects that we know of in recent times in the country. Designed to the T, every single edge controlled, large scale, enormous amounts of money have been spent on it. I'm thinking about the Kashi Vishwanath corridor in Banaras. I'm thinking of what I saw at the Mahakal temple last week. I'm thinking even about the Central Vista project. or for that matter, the multiple waterfronts whose drawings are so clean that they have absolutely no space for a tree. Yeah. And they're all well designed in the sense that they seem to, or what we call well designed, hardened edges, precise, proportionate, well lit, but absolutely not caring for what Professor Rameshwaran PVK said, which is about life. Yeah. And I feel like this is really the issue that we really have to think about. Like, what does the design of life mean? Unfortunately, when we think about design, our imaginations are limited by our own media. The medium that we claim to have some amount of authority over is that of the drawing. And the drawing automatically creates a certain distance, detachment, and abstraction in the way that we can think about our relationship with the world. And I feel, which is why I feel like the way that you've been working, or way that you guys have been working with community conversation, right? Those I think cities have to be imagined as processes, and well-designed processes make well-designed cities. So when you say well-designed, I have a feeling we need to change what we call good design in the first place. Because in all the projects that we've seen so far, the idea of design is reduced to that of a photogenic spectacle as a background for politicians to perform theater. Rather than that, if we start thinking about the processes through which we imagine inclusivity, inclusive methods, ecologically, I hate to use the phrase because it's such a cliche, but nevertheless, ecologically sensitive ways of dealing with the local, I think we can evolve processes where the cities don't have to look in the way that we think a good designed city is supposed to look, but can rather be places where people feel enabled and people feel joyous to participate in the world. That's it.
If I can add to this, and I will say many politically incorrect things here, this also stems from our profession's obsession with achieving the right thing and absolutely to be enjoyed and experienced in the way that I have determined. This is a long-standing tradition for ourselves where the client is an idiot, they don't know how to use the house, you need to educate them. And we extend that to the city, to the people, and in every single one of these cases, all the wonderful examples that you mentioned, if you speak to the designer will have exactly this response. Look, it's meant to work this way. Our people don't understand how to use these spaces, right? And you're absolutely right. I mean, well-designed, the terminology itself is a problematic thing because for us, design stems from the very idea of imparting order or even extreme control of a space. It's never about facilitating a process. Actually, it needs nothing more than facilitation in many cases. But then we feel we are not doing our job well enough. If we don't produce the 800 drawings and pour 500 million tons of concrete, we think we are actually not done our job. So it's also about how we frame both the issue, not the problem, because we are very good at solving problems that don't even exist, because we need to create the problem, right? So, but framing the issue in a way that you can actually facilitate it for it to be inhabited by people in many different ways, without, and this is important, without romanticizing, disorder or chaos as being the cool thing. It looks great on a postcard, but the lived experience of the hawker would be very different from how the influencer sees it on a reel. So I think that's an important distinction we need to make.
I'll put it under two big buckets. I think what we should start re-looking at is the human measure. I feel that most often, if you look at most of the schemes which have come by also, what does it mean to play the human measure, right? Most often people are disconnected from the process. So what do we call success? And I think all the examples which we've just spoken about, is there a success matrix to this? Even putting a matrix itself is a problem. So for us to measure what is successful could also be a big question mark. So I would say that let's look at human measure. That's really important. And sometimes design has this innate ability to choreograph things, and whether that is right itself, right, or whether we should allow for chance. I feel that there should be an incompleteness in design. So as much as chance is possible, I think that adds value to the project base itself. So for me, I would look at it under these probably three ends: the human measure, to look at whether choreography is required, on how much chance, and the incompleteness of design. So finally, I think it's people who use this place or space complete the design. I don't think so. An architect or designer should be sitting there to say, behave like this, or move like this. Because you need to create a framework, but beyond that, successful design comes from what you see in the project after 20 years, like what we were discussing about his own home in the LIC colony, which was done by Charles Correa, and how it is matured through a period of time. So can you evaluate that? Yes, today you take the great positives of that. Whether Charles Correa thought of it at that time, I don't know. But today you mature through the process, and that's the splendor and the joy of actually sitting in where communities come and just take over, and then design becomes completeness there. So I think that these are, it's a debate, unending debate on these things. So for me, choreography is always a problem. To choreograph extremely is always a huge problem.
I also think that if we have to really think about what good is, we cannot think about it without thinking about the way that class and caste disparities work in our cities. Do we really think about our cities from the point of view of the people who are meant to clean them? I don't think we do. Okay. I feel like if you have to really start thinking about creating genuinely kind of, let's say, celebratory cities, we need to really start thinking from the point of view of those who the city has discarded and whom the city marginalizes. And I think only then we can begin to think what good is. The problem is the word good currently is based in our own kind of class, kind of, let's say, positions. We have not been able to find ways of shifting the architectural sort of presumptions of goodness, or urban design goodness, into any other framework. And we've been tried, but usually it's just lip service. We don't really kind of push ourselves to the edge of our thinking.
Just a small point I would like to add is that there is a problem that we have been carrying in architectural education. Cities have always been a built thought. People actually think of cities as something that is very definitive, that is city as a machine, or as something that is already preconceived, having a certain amount of footprint and people and all that. And also, many times being architects, there is also a tendency to see it as a definitive product, as something that is already well defined and well designed, kind of. That itself is, now we are realizing that many of those thoughts, many of them came from big masters that we consider people as masters. It came from them. Have not really produced great cities that are resilient, that are accommodative, that have the flexibility to accommodate change, the ability to transform or transcend to the current times, and also take us to the future and accommodate the concerns that arise from time to time. And more than that, the level of incrementality that is sometimes required, the level of flexibility that is required in spaces are many times not available, because the design is so definitive that it doesn't allow you to become flexible. And within the spacing, we know that according to the temporal and the seasonal and the yearly festivals and things like that, it can actually become very, very different in terms of its footprint, its usage, its future changes, its adaptability to things like climate change and things like that, and changes in culture, community. So I think we have to look at it from a very, very different perspective. And these are not new cities that we are designing. These are living cities where we are doing some sort of a experimental kind of project. We are inserting something into it. And I think if it doesn't have that gracious, that, very generous kind of approach to accommodate the future, then I think there is something wrong with the approach altogether. Yeah.
I think if you mean a good design being synonymous with physical design, then I think it has one meaning. But I think that's where the limitations can come. And if we inquire more and more in urban design, we start redefining the word design, and is not merely restricted to physical design. So even financial strategies, legal mechanisms, all being part of the physical design can start constituting design. And once I start doing that, the whole idea of one, processes come in. Second, you know that it is not deterministic. Third, you also realize it is not an imposition, and that probably it is evolving. So what you come up with is a very imprecisely precise design. And I think that's what leaves room for participation, for evolution, for taking onus of a project, and then therefore, I would say, leads into successful design. So if you redefine this word design, then I think both good design and successful can become one. But looking at the conventional definitions, I think the two are two very different aspects.
Yeah, it's historically, when we look at old cities, which are successful places as we learn, not all components are definitively designed. So if you look at it, one historic temple would be placed. Markers, visual corridors, perceptible edges will be defined. But other than that, the spaces between them are self-articulated by people over a period of time. So it's not constrained. It's not. That's why if you look at Agraharam, one house might come in, one might go out. The Thinnai might be longer in one spot. And those are the choices that people would put across. How do they want to present or interact with the public space? So the one problem that I see when it comes to architects is, like, we are standing with classes. When we look at design, it's a personal perception. Maybe we take inputs from the clients, the cost and all the parameters, but it's like you're presenting your glasses when someone is going in, and then you expect them to see through these lenses. That perspective will not work in an urban design. You would have to remove all these glasses, and you would have to give opportunity for people to invent use in space. So while approaching this, yes, certain infrastructural interventions have to be done clearly with projections and understanding of what the flow or the floods and other parameters have to be. They would have to be the invisible layer that cannot be compromised, that has to be planned and designed. But the surface level interventions have to be open and deliberately kept open, so people can find meaning over a period of time as social requirements change, as the city changes. So it will constantly be relevant over a period of time.
I'm reminded of this meeting where I was presenting a streetscape design project, and when I mentioned that, a space, a certain wider section of the sidewalk would be used for pop-up vending spaces as, temporarily required, for either puja, Diwali or Pongal, and that vendors could come and, it becomes a livelihood platform for them at that point. I think the entire room was just appalled. They were just like, oh my God, like, and at that, I mean, it kind of, brought back the reality that a lot of times, cities tend to, or at least city officials tend to look at design as a means of control. Like, I'm using design to keep them in and keep them out. And I'm getting to choose who's going to be there and who's not going to be there. And the idea of temporality somehow is just like shocking, like, how can a space be used differently and how do we control that? Who uses it at what time, like, But at the same time, as what you said, Shailesh, this is just the markers are there, and the spaces in between tend to get occupied by women fancier of the people that are there. Then it becomes a truly living space, and that is what makes it truly successful. That not the same image that you see, the same sterile image that you see every day is not what makes a great public space at the end of the day. So thank you for these reflections. I think you'd like to add a point.
If I can just add one last point, this is of course an expected reaction. We all face it.
Yeah.
But it's
But we still try to.
no, but it's the very same bougie people, if I can be crude about it, how they celebrate the La Ramblas or the Florence as wonderful living spaces. They will pay good money to go buy the fridge magnet for €8 from those hawkers, but you do not want those hawkers on your own street.
Yeah. No, it's funny because a lot of times they will give you Las Ramblas as a precedent, as an example, and say, we want to make this like that. But you realize that they're only selectively looking at something, the entire frame. They are eliminating certain things when they say, I want that. They don't want the full frame. They want parts of that frame.
Yeah.
And that's what they like to choose as well. So yes, of course. Yes. I think thank you so much for the reflections. We'd like to open it up to the audience at this point. If there are any questions from, you such an eminent panel here, and any questions, any reflections from the discussions, very rich discussion that we've had here today as well.
Any questions? No, I thought that everybody belongs to Trichy, and I think they also feel that they own the place. So they have gone through this, and probably they'll have some questions to ask. But before that, I have one, so I just go ahead with that. So because I think we've seen all this, but because I think some of the things may be good as an idea, but when it comes to doability, because I'm talking from the Trichy City Corporation point of view, so I would like to have some pointers where we can start immediately, and which are the doable ones, or how do we go about it? Because I think from here onwards, we'll have to take it forward that way. Because there's no two ideas that the first one, which everybody wants to address, is the immediate present around the Teppakulam. But then can it sustain on its own, or there should be some other things which start happening simultaneously so that it becomes more of a precinct rather than one destiny point?
I think the Trichy Municipal Corporation would not be any exception. I think all municipal corporations, in fact all government bodies, have a tenure within which they need to perform. And I think is a deadline which tells that something has to be attained in 3 years, 5 years. I think from my experience, the way we have dealt is that we would like to keep the long-term vision in mind, and at the same time the ability to break it down to immediate doables is something which fulfills both. That is, one, we feel that we have not come up with end of the pipe solutions, and we really have a holistic view. And in course of time, if not this set of government, the next government, some things will keep on adding for the betterment of the place. So what we would suggest, I think, in the all the entries that shortlisted have all the potential, and we have been very careful while evaluating to see as much as there is a strong idea and a strong holistic idea rather, and the ability to break it down to components or sub-projects which are doable. And I think each of them have. So I think we have kept that in mind. So it's now a matter of how closely you look into it and then interpret from then and take it forward. So there's a next step. This competition being an idea level competition, and I think we did emphasize a lot on the strength of an idea that it has the ability to carry far. It's not short-sightedness, but has an ability to deliver in course of time. Now, for example, even simple things like you say what if you tackle infrastructure, whether you say just solid waste management, you just clean up the place, you tackle the infrastructure in terms of traffic, itself will start making a big difference to the entire look and feel of the place. A lot of construction and all can follow later, but I think even if you, and I think all these projects have that potential. So we would suggest that if you can sit down with whichever is the winning entry and would like to, go ahead with, to work out from their projects to be able to come up with the action plan and sub projects which are very doable. So as of now, as a jury, I think we did feel it has the potential. It's a matter of someone sitting with you all, and so I would put it like that rather than answering you something more specifically.
Because that gives us a lot of confidence, because sometimes these when it comes to a competition, people feel that all these things look good and it's a good idea and all these things, but whether it is doable, whether it is like when it comes to the ground, what are the problems that are involved? So I think it's I just wanted a confirmation from you that all these projects are doable.
I think I've taken the liberty to speak on behalf of the jury. I think we have been very, very both careful, cautious, and equally interested to see that it has the ability to go forward, and that also immediately. So I think, and if there are further clarifications, later we can talk on that further, but I think all of them have that potential. Because we were, sorry, just one thing. We were very wary about beautification. Most governments talk about beautification for an immediate impact. So as much as we care for how the look and feel is, we also feel that there is something which has to be something inherently strong to be able to sustain in course of time, and not something like a fashion that tomorrow this color is out of fashion, so let's repaint the whole thing. So it is not superfluous attempts that we valued. We have really gone into seeing that it has long-term value to the city.
Any questions?
Good morning, everyone. So it's a great pleasure to be here, and it's an amazing panel we have got here. So thank you for that as well. My name is Ashwin. I am a student. I have just finished my architecture, but still a student. I'm from School of Planning and Architecture, Vijayawada, and it's a great pleasure actually. And I will go ahead with my question. So when we look into urban design or urban design as a broad aspect, and we always look into examples that are very Western, like we already discussed here. And in those Western scenarios, or the best architectural examples that we have always got, they usually deal with one set of people, let's say the Christian people, or the population is majority, it's for the Christian self. And when it's in the case of India, where we are a very secular population, where we are forced to design a space that is open to all, that is meant to be celebrated by everyone, and a place or a space that has to be inclusive to every single religion that's currently in the country. And for example, in our present itself, we have got a church, a very well-known mosque, a very well-known temple. The entire present is a possession area where they do a lot of temple related activity, but it's also a place where people celebrate Christmas. It's also a place where people do a lot of shopping. So when we have so much of importance into this area, and if we have to design that space, and if we have to make sure that people feel belong there, the sense of belonging, and usually we do it by taking few elements from the most seen architecture, and then we try to interpret it in our way. But then when we have so many different elements acting here, how do we create something that is very cohesive in the nature it is? So while designing as the entire project, we felt that was our greatest struggle. We can't put yalis everywhere in our pillars and then call it it's open to everyone. So views into that.
I know it's a longer discussion that merits this. However, my simple understanding is for something to be secular does not mean it has to be irreligious or it has to be atheistic. It's not erasure of a religion or an identity that makes a place secular. Secular, at least the way the word is understood and used by me, is that it's not just tolerating others. And I think that's a very horrible term to use. I mean, I can tolerate mosquitoes. Should I tolerate other religions? No. It's how inclusive and accommodating in a pleasurable way that the place has to be. If you look at the religions themselves and the way it is practiced, how many churches in Tamil Nadu take out a Ratha Yatra, the Teru, right? That's not written in the tenets of the Bible, but that's how it is celebrated here. So we are the ones, or at least the ones with our forced formal education, reimagining these things to say these divisions should exist. It doesn't. You don't even need to do anything. And like the earlier discussion on the space, these will be appropriated and made friendly by the people and the practitioners. I don't think we need to be in this benevolent dictatorship mode where we will actually have to determine every religion's place in society and space. All of these practices, in whichever way, have a way of finding their own place in the cities that we live in. And it does not have to be served at all by presenting tokenistic, references. Could be a yali, could be a cross, could be something really does not make the place any more secular or religious. Maybe this is my personal opinion and not really something that's necessarily professional.
What you're saying is our greatest strength. Okay. So if you look at it as a problem, then there's nothing much we can progress with. The moment you see it as a problem to have all these represented in public space, then it's a problem. You have come hundreds of years cherishing and capturing everybody's experience as a part of. We still celebrate Christmas. We still celebrate Pongal. We still have these parameters as a part of life, whether we are a part of that core belief or not. So comparing it to Western beliefs. So if you look at Western beliefs, they are fundamentally, every city is a reflection of its social structure. If you look at the Western world, responsibility is something that inculcated at a very small age. Every individual is felt important. They are stepping out of the house when they are 12. They are responsible for their life after that age. Whereas that's why those cities are spick and span. Everything is very clearly articulated. Everything is responsibly understood, where your boundaries are, who you are, what you are. We are a society which is a conglomerate. In most of the houses, none of us know how decisions are made. We live in a continuum. It is not our importance that is always important. It's a collective understanding of what is important that matures. And that's why our cities are also ambiguous. That's why platforms become places where economy evolves. Platform becomes spaces where people could walk, negotiations could happen. That is the core of who we are. A city is a reflection of who we are. So if you capture who we are, if you capture what Trichy is, what this precinct is, solutions are a platform to enhance it, or provide opportunity spaces for it to expand. If you look at it from forceful intervention of putting an image of someone over there and saying this belongs here, that belongs here, that makes no sense in our space. That makes no answer to this problem. That will bring no cohesivity in what you're trying to achieve. So the very point of trying to crystallize very understanding of the space is not the way. Finding a middle ground, finding a way in which everybody feels comfortable, finding a way, cherishing who we are, if that is the starting point of designing, then it's a wonderful experience. And I don't believe reference to the Western world makes sense to us.
Can I add to the point to that? Yeah.
Like rightly said by Architect Mohan, it is not tolerating, but it is more than that, accommodating and things like that. Just to quote something from the history, one of the very Hindu religious important spot, Rameshwaram. It is captained in building the temple. You know who is the captain? Who made the design decisions and everything? Sirakadi is a Muslim saint. He was the captain of the building of Rameshwaram temple, right? Assigned by the then Sethupathi, the king of Ramnath. And after that, there were a lot of reminiscence, remaining of pillars and other components. So with the permission of the king, he used those elements to build a mosque in Kirakarai. Still evident, you can go see there. Almost all the motifs, except the human figures or some figures in it. Otherwise, it is the same as your Rameswaram temple pillars. It's a mosque. So, where the problem is, more than accommodation, just to recognize and give the credit. That's it. Chitrai festival of Madurai, you can see lots of Muslims participating in the celebrations. Photographs are there, videos are there. It's just coexisting, accepting, or not even accepting. It has to be recognizing the whole thing. There is not a problem. What is the context? What is the detail you want to give? You give that. Don't bother about all these things. Then the problem comes. Thank you.
Just a small point. I think in a public space, any public space, anywhere in India or any part of the world, by definition, it is a secular space. So, there is no discussion required. You should not, as a designer, you should not even be thinking about making it exclusive. It has to be inclusive by definition. It has to be democratic. It has to be equitable. And that there is no compromise in that. So avoid using any kind of symbolism and all those kind of things. People have used it for asserting power and asserting certain kind of control over public spaces in the past. But this is democratic India and we cannot do that. So this is very, very clear. But the moment you step inside a premises of a, let's say, a religious place, then maybe, there are certain symbolism and there are certain guidelines that you may follow, which is probably particular to that, their practices and things like that. But in a public space, you don't even have to bother about it. There is no question about using any kind of such symbolisms. It has to be secular. It has to be democratic. It has to be inclusive. And there are other concerns that should lead, in fact, that is that of climate change and that of making place for differently abled and safety for women and children. There are many other concerns that should actually lead your design rather than, this is something that you can completely take it away from the equation. Thank you.
Vidya, may I just add a little bit, which is a question to a question. Because I'm not sure about some things. One is, of course, I see that any intervention which happens, especially in a case like this or any other city, that we have to perhaps stop seeing it as a closure of or a site that will never be a site again. So I think to keep that open-endedness to an approach so that it will transform over time and that our role is in this point of transition and definition. The question part is more of greater interest to me because we were speaking about certain developments which have happened in Benares and various other places. We have seen what the Britishers did. We have seen the old courtyards, the royal courtyards, or so there has been. Why is it that? And of course, there is an obvious answer that when it gets very definite and with the purpose of control, it gets a certain geometry, it gets a certain language, it gets a certain material. So, so perhaps it is more a representation of a political goal rather than the architects. So it is not a people's project, it is a political project. This is a people's project. So I think the language changes because I don't see that level of control being evident even in the colonial projects. So something is amiss, So I think the languages change with this.
This is a question of our times. I mean, that's the unfortunate thing that we all have to face. It's the increasing kind of way in which the question of citizenship is being kind of fragmented into feudal clans. And our discourse has ended up becoming one clan against the other. And my suggestion is resist it. Resist even asking that question because it is a trap. And then you'll end up with like, I gave you something, no? So I'll give you something also. And you'll never end because we are not so, we cannot even be categorized into 4, 5, 15, 500 categories. Citizenship is the only category that all of us belong to, and that is the only one that we should be concerned about.
I'm not an architect, but I'm born in a family of 2 architects. And I've worked in the public sector in transfer planning in Oxford. So it's a historical city again. And I know how long such a process usually takes to do. And the more pragmatic view, so first of all, it's normally urban planners usually do these kind of visionings for all the big cities. So it's also good that an architect actually take the initiative to do these things. But in a pragmatic view, let's say in the near future, what is actually possible is how we design the spaces around these Teppakulam areas, which usually comes to the architect. Like say architects want to build individual commercial buildings or residential buildings, or etc. So what should an architect's view be in this scenario? Like, as I said, like I have 2 architects in a family who have very polarized views in terms of ideology, in terms of how they work with clients. One says the client is the king, and the other says that you need to provide the lens of what how the city needs to evolve, and etc. So, what is the role of an architect in actually the short-term wins? Like when they develop spaces around these precincts, and when they design for buildings, and what should be their lens when they view when they talk to the client, for example? So that's just my question. Thank you.
First, don't allow 2 architects to live in the same house.
Yeah, it was sounding strangely familiar, this situation. I think some cities are clearly singularly driven, which is, let's say, whether they're driven on tourism, the matters become simpler because the projection that the city has to make is very clearly to a certain audience with a certain expectation. Like if we go to, let's say, Mexico, we have an imagination of this Mexican architecture, and things like that. And the same happens in our neighboring countries. What we expect from when you go to Colombo or other parts of Sri Lanka, you have an imagination of this kind of architecture between a colonial one to a one transformed by Baba, and that kind of language then is the general expectation. Trichy becomes more difficult. Bangalore is extremely difficult because they have just moved into things where the audience is so varied and the expectations, aspirations is very varied. So I think then one is talking about a spirit of place and building, which is it looks to all parts of the world, but it also has to find its roots. So it's trying to find a way. So it is going to be very eclectic. It cannot be a singular image anymore. Older cities had that advantage that they were built over time with most of the materials locally found and with techniques and skills which were very localized. Now material is moving across the world, and so that's happening. So I think for Trichy especially, it will be that what is that nerve or which are the 2-3 key points which kind of define how a material, what materials could make a difference to bring a certain sense of unity and certain sense of freedom. And in the design to talk about certain amount of something which is progressive in the sense of its dynamics and what also relates, and because this is a place which has grown over a couple of centuries. So, so it'll have to, so I think it becomes an individual kind of interpretation in that sense. But yeah, identifying certain things to think about, I think would be a key beginning for a language which has enough freedom to plug in, because I think that's what it is. It is also that it is not being deterministic in terms of, otherwise it would look like what a king would do at one time, and all the buildings would have the same facade or the same scale and same purpose or a defined purpose. So yeah, I think I'll leave it at that it's a very important question to be answered and to think about, even if a single building or a thing has to be done.
I think one change which architects, because you said the architects have to make is that great cities are not made by one architectural project. There could be, I think, is a collective architectural, which is important. So if an architect says that I get over the arrogance of saying that my building has to stand out, as against having the humility to say is a part of a larger ensemble, then I think you have much better surrounds. And I think that needs a little change in the perception of an architect.
I know, are you asking for tips how to handle stuff at home?
Sounded like that.
On a lighter note and being more focused on it, I think largely the argument lies on people, place, and time. So I think that's what's reflective. In fact, most often we give weightage one over the other, but for us to find a balance between all the three is important. And a classic case would be if you take projects in which there's been layers to it. A classic case would be, let's say, large universities. I'm just taking, it's not as a public project, but institutional project, you'll find that the master plan is done by somebody, then it matures into something else. There is architecture done, and then every 5 years, a new architect comes and adds a new flavor to that to the place. So for us, I think we've always lived in this collage state, that we've always have multiple layers. It's important for us to be appreciative of those multiple layers and how these multiple layers coexist. So it comes from largely how we are dealing with this negotiating at the threshold levels. So if we are more or less there, I think we've got a good response. And it's tough. I'm sure it is tough. We discussed temple precincts and how they have different layers. How the civic keeps changing, because civic is also very dynamic. So for us to be kind of when the architect moves away from being the architect and becoming human, I think then there is an improvement, or I think the fair questions are asked there. I feel that we keep ourselves in the apex of everything. I think it's important for the architect to move away. I think a lot of the problems get solved in that situation.
I think we will close the session for now. Again, I think thank you so much again for your generosity of time and sharing your thoughts with us. Rohan, you're not getting up already. I mean, I think the overarching takeaway is that this discussion and this entire process, I think, really reinstates the value of opening up this process of city making to many voices. And on that note, I'd like to, again, thank the entire team of Reimagining Teppakulam, and also, sort of like to think that this initiative enabled us to democratize conversations about the future of public spaces in Trichy and possibly beyond as well. With this, we'd like to move on to the big moment for today is the announcement of the awards. You all can stay seated here. Kapilan will make the announcements now, and we'll start with the student category. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to face this space.
So we'll start with the student entries. So for the student entries, like you all know, we have architect Shaumitra Ghosh, architect Rohan Shivkumar, and architect Shailesh Hariharan as the jurors. So I'm reading from their jury statement. So they've given a common jury statement. The jury found the entries wide, varied, and some being engaging and introspective. Some were able to reinforce ritualistic significance, the role of places in creating memories with vitality and evocations. But the expectation of the student competition was to come up with provocations that would add a binding layer to the already complex and rich nature of the location, which could lead to solutions that are holistic and at the same time rooted. A few had understood the depth of the urban layers, but had taken a softer approach when it came to envisioning the possible spatial articulations. The above citation winning entries, which is with the unique ID RT_S_24 and RT_S_27, have successfully visualized a very interesting provocation towards a new reality. Having said that, both the entries fall short from winning the competition as they miss to clearly articulate their visions as representative drawings or diagrams. So we do not have a winning or a runner-up entries. We have two citations that would be entry number 24 and 27. Congrats. So, So are there anyone present from their respective teams? Your number? 27. So that, yeah. So this is 27, one of the members of High. Yeah, 24. We would pull up the sheets very briefly so that the audience can have a view. Sorry? Yeah, yes. Yeah. Yes, can you please introduce yourself and your team members?
Good afternoon, everyone. So, myself, I'm Ashwin Karthik. I'm from Chennai, but I've done my college in School of Planning and Architecture, Vijayawada, like mentioned earlier. And my teammate, she's Mathura Trichy Anbalagan. Like her name suggests, she's from Trichy. And both of us are batchmates, and we are the only two people who worked on this project. And I'll just take a few minutes to go through the sheet if that's okay.
If it's very, very brief.
Yeah, very brief. So the present was too huge, and since we are just two people, we actually cut short how much that we are going to deal with, but focus only into a very small portion that is just around the temple pond alone. And over here, we thought we would introduce a lot of flexible public spaces so it doesn't interrupt the timely positions that happens in that area, but to cater with a solution where people can feel belong, can still have a lot of visual connection to the history, feel connected to the space while being very, a space where people feel belong still. So that was our approach.
Thank you. I request the participant and the student jurors to have a picture together for. You can do that. 24. Do we have someone from the team? No. No. So yeah, I'll just pull up the sheets. Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, please. So this is 24, which is Arush Krishna Kumar. He's the team lead. These are the sheets, and this is the second one. This is the other winning entry. Citation. Sorry. It's from Tamil Nadu. Yeah. So. It just says Tamil Nadu. They haven't mentioned that it's school. Okay. So moving on to the professional category. So I'll go going from reverse. So the third prize goes to the entry number RT_P_30 with the team lead Purvi Chadwa from AVN Architecture and Urbanism School.
Do you have anyone from the team here? Is there anyone from the team here? AVN Architecture?
Is there anyone from the team? Okay, we don't have. Okay, I will read out the jury statement. The commendation is for cultural continuity and living heritage. Yeah. The jury commends the team for its sensitive and insightful approach to integrating living heritage, water systems, and local livelihoods. The proposal is distinguished by its understanding that the future of Teppakulam is inseparable from its cultural traditions, rituals, and everyday economic life. Rather than relying on large-scale intervention, the project adopts a series of carefully considered strategic moves that collectively reinforce the precinct's identity while enabling meaningful transformation. The jury particularly appreciated the proposal's commitment to cultural continuity, its thoughtful integration of heritage and livelihoods, and its vision of reconnecting Teppakulam with the city and the people. Supported by a clear implementation and phasing strategy, the proposal demonstrates how incremental yet purposeful interventions can create lasting civic, cultural, and social value. The entry from the team serves as a compelling model for heritage-led regeneration rooted in place, memory, and community. Congratulations to the team. So the team is from Ahmedabad. Yeah. So now we announce the second prize entry. The second prize goes to the team led by Joseph Rahul, Palli Ammula, or from the organization Habitat Collective. So it's a mixed team from two different cities, one from Bangalore and Mumbai, I presume. Yeah. Is there anyone from the team? So I'll read out the jury statement. The commendation from the jury is for people-centered urbanism. The jury commends the entry for placing people, memory, and everyday urban life at the center of design conversation. With Teppakulam as its anchor, the proposal demonstrates a deep understanding of the precinct as a living civic landscape shaped by movement, culture, commerce, and social interaction. Its greatest strength lies in its ability to integrate the diverse character of the precinct into a coherent and inclusive urban network. The proposal presents a thoughtful mobility strategy that prioritizes walkability, shared streets, and tactical urbanism interventions, creating a more accessible and people-friendly environment. The jury appreciated the emphasis on public life, temporal patterns of use, and the creation of meaningful connection between places and communities. The entry is a persuasive example of how human-centered design can strengthen both the identity and everyday experience of a historic urban precinct where associative quality reinforces a sense of place. Congratulations.
Yeah. Can we have the jurors for a picture, the professional category jurors?
So that leaves us with the first winning entry. The entry would be with the unique ID number 12. The team headed by Rushika Khanna of Public Landscape and Urbanism Studio. I believe they're from Bangalore. Congratulations.
Is anyone from the team here? Yes. Please come forward.
So I'll give the jury commendation. So the commendation for this entry is regenerative water urbanism. The jury commends the team for its exemplary approach to regenerative water urbanism and its holistic understanding of the Teppakulam precinct as an interconnected ecological and cultural system. The proposal demonstrates remarkable clarity in integrating water, ecology, heritage, public realm, and climate resilience into a singular and coherent vision. Its strength lies in recognizing water not merely as a physical asset, but as the organizing framework for the future of the precinct. The proposal successfully operates across various multiple scales, from localized ecological interventions to broader landscape and hydrological systems, creating a resilient and future-ready urban network framework. The jury particularly appreciated the structured phasing strategy, the thoughtful integration of blue-green infrastructure, and the use of prototypical design interventions that enhance both feasibility and replicability. The entry stands out as a compelling model for how historic urban landscapes can be revitalized through ecological stewardship and long-term resilience. Hearty congratulations to the team. So, I request the viewers to the team member to take it. Yeah.
Thank you, Kapil and the jurors. And announcement, the Reimagining Teppakulam website, which is now put up, would always be online and the site will be up, and all the related documents which is being shared along with the design dossier and other things would be there in the website for future references. Thank you. And I now request Architect P. Chandranasan, Chairman, Arts Trust, to deliver the vote of thanks. Sorry, Secretary, Arts Trust, to deliver the vote of thanks.
So Arts Trust is just a representation of the whole architects of Trichy. It was started as a small club 40 years back. Then we became Indian Institute of Architects 30 years back. And this Arts Trust was formed 20 years back. But as Vijay said, this is our first fruitful initiative. And my thanks is for our trustees and the architects of Trichy. That's my first thanks. And my thanks is to the partners, CII, Trichy Tourism Corporation, Trichy City Corporation, Car School of Architecture, and Trichy Center. My special thanks to the participants, because without them, this event can't happen. And it's a very good number for such a short span, and we were really overwhelmed to have 40 registrations from the professional head category, and special thanks to everyone. And we are immensely pleasured to have such eminent people as jurors in a weekend, on a Saturday and Sunday. All of them have spent time with us, and we really enjoyed the time with you. Thanks, jurors. And thanks to everyone who are here today. And my special thanks to the back-end workers, like the travel, my tools. We are online right now, and as such, a good number of people are following it up right now. And it is because of the Adi photography. Thanks to them. And thanks to the venue partner, Hotel Ramya's, for giving such a venue for our visioning workshop and as well as for this event. And of course, they are hosting with the lunch. Thanks for everyone. And I request everyone to have lunch and disperse. Thank you.
Thank you. I request everyone to rise for the national anthem.
And before that, special thanks to Architect Vidya, who was our mentor. And the four young architects who worked on this project, special mention to them: Architect Kapilan, Architect Mitranan, Architect Maria, and Architect Gayatri. They made it happen. Thanks to them. Architect Rakesh. Thank you.
पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
I request everyone to join for lunch, which is being served in the next hall. Please do join us for lunch.